On Wednesday's column for the Week 7 homework, we were asked to order the different forms of the numbers from least to greatest. So we were given three numbers and we were expected to be able to order them from least to greatest. But as you can see, these three numbers here are all in different forms. They have one is a fraction, the other is a decimal, and then the other is a percent. So we have to convert all of them into the same format so that we're better able to compare them. And the way that we're going to do that is converting all of them into decimals. So decimals are going to be the easiest thing to compare. Decimals and percents are not that different from one another, but decimal I think is going to be the easiest one here. So we need to turn this 2/3 into a decimal. So how do we turn a fraction into a decimal? You divide it just the way it's set up. So in other words, this 2/3 can also be said as 2 divided by 3. 2 divided by 3. And if we do that, if we put 2 divided by 3, then 3 goes into 2 0 times. We're going to put a decimal, add a 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times, which turns into 18. 20 minus 18 is 2. And then add another 0. And then you can see that we've already gotten this 20 before. We had it up here, and now we have it here. So if we were to keep going, then this would just continue to repeat. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a line over the 6 and understand that 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. This is 0.767. We're just going to keep it as it is. And then 70%. To turn a percent into a decimal is probably going to be the easiest thing we're going to do in class. And that is you're going to take the decimal wherever it's at. In this case, 70 has a decimal at the end, since 70 is a whole number. And you're going to move it over 2 times to the left, because what we're doing is dividing by 100. But you're just going to move it over 2 times to the left, and that turns any percent into its decimal form. So 70% as a decimal is 0 and 70 hundredths. Okay, now we just have to compare them in order from least to greatest. I'm going to extend this 0.6 repeating. I'm going to extend that out to 2 decimal places. And it's still going to be repeating, but I'm just extending it out so that we can have 2 decimals in all of our numbers. And so now the next thing we're going to do is look at the place value of the numbers. So look at the place value of the numbers and see where do they become different. So all of these have zeros at the end. If we go on to the next one, this has a 6, this has a 6, and this has a 7. So the place values of 6 are going to be smaller than the place value of 7. So I can already tell that 0.70 is going to be my biggest number. So I'm going to put a 3. And then out of these next 2 numbers, if I look at the last place value in the hundredths place, I can see that 6 is going to be smaller than 7. So 0.6 repeating, even though it has an infinite number of 6's going, the second place value is smaller than the 0.67, and so therefore the number itself is smaller as well. Because technically this 0.67, any decimal has a million zeros, an infinite amount of zeros going to the right of it. All right, so hopefully that made sense. Let's try another one. And then if you are able to knock this out on your own, you don't have to watch the entire video. All right, 0.015, that one's already a decimal. 0.15, also already a decimal. So we just need to convert 1.6% into a decimal by taking the current decimal and moving it over 2 places to the left. And fill in any spots with zeros that don't have a number already there. So then 1.6%, or 1 6/10% turns into 0 and 16 thousandths. So again, I just took that decimal, I just moved it over 2 places to the left, and that turns any percent into a decimal. And then since these are already decimals, we can just keep them as they are. And then now we're going to compare place values to see which of the place values is where they begin to be different, and therefore now at that point is when we can compare them. So they all have zeros. So you can't compare them there. The next number, this has a 0, this has a 1, and this has a 0. So because this has a 1 in the middle, that's 15 hundredths, that's going to be our largest number. That's going to be number 3. And then this should start becoming a little easier. But the next one is going to be 1, and then we got 5 and 6. So then out of all of these, my smallest number is going to be the 0.015, and then my 0.016, and then lastly 3, 0.15. So hopefully you're feeling that this is not that crazy difficult. Here we already have 2 decimals, so we only have to convert one one of the numbers into a decimal is 2/9. So we're going to do 2 divided by 9. 9 goes into 2 0 times. And then that's going to give you a remainder of 2. Add a decimal, add a 0. 9 goes into 22 times. And then that's going to give you 18. Add 2, remainder of 2, add a 0. And we've already gotten 20 before. So that's where we're going to stop and turn it into 0.2 repeating. I'm going to move this work over to the side. So now the numbers we're comparing are 0 and 12 thousandths, 0 and 2 repeating, and 0 and 12 hundredths. We're going to compare by their place value. This has a 0, this has a 0, this has a 0. We're good there. This has a 0, this has a 2, and then this has a 1. So just right there, we can already compare all of these values. We don't have to extend any further. The one with the 0, that's going to be our smallest. The second smallest is going to be the one with the number 1. And then lastly, 0.2 repeating, that's going to be our largest number. Okay, here we do have 2 that we're going to need to convert. We're going to have to begin by converting 25% into its decimal form. Just a reminder, you can think about this as like $25. $25 would have a decimal here at the end of the 5. So technically this 25% has a decimal here at the end, and we're just going to move it over 2 places to the left, and it's going to turn into 0.25%, or I'm sorry, 0 and 25 hundredths. The next value is already as a decimal, which is 0 and 25 thousandths. And then 25 over 75, we're going to divide those two numbers in order to determine what the decimal value is going to be. Remember, top number goes on the inside, 75 goes into 25 0 times, remainder of 25, add a 0. 75 goes into 250 about 3 times. That's going to give me 225, remainder of 25. And then as you can see, we already had 25 and 25 as a remainder, so then that means this is going to be 0 and 3/10 repeating. Now you also could have simplified this, and I would have recommended that, but I wanted to show you how you would do it first. You also can simplify this down. This 25 over 75, if you divide both sides by 25, it turns into 1/3. And then that's going to be a little bit easier to divide than 25 and 75. 1 into 3 is going to be a little bit simpler. But you're still going to get the same decimal. So now what we need to do is look at our place values and compare them. They all have zeros at the end. The next place value, this has a 2, this has a 0, this has a 3. So just with that, we're able to compare them. We can say that this is going to be our smallest because it has a 0 in the tens place. Second smallest, and then lastly our largest. All right, let's move over into the last one. We've got 16%, 3/8, and then 0 and 3 hundredths. So 16% as a decimal, we're just going to grab the decimal, move it over 2 places to the left, turns into 0 and 16 hundredths. 3/8, we're going to have to divide 3 by 8, which goes in 0 times, remainder of 3, add a decimal, add a 0, 8 goes into 33 times, remainder of 6, add a 0, 8 goes into 67 times, remainder of 4, add another 0, and 8 goes into 45 times, with a remainder of 0. So now we've solved out our decimal is going to be 0 and 375 thousandths. And then lastly, we already have a decimal here, 0 and 3 hundredths. And then now we're going to compare the place values. And hopefully just by looking at them now, you're getting a little better at it. You could say that this would be your smallest because it has a 0 in the tens place. This number over here would be your second smallest. And lastly, your largest would be 0 and 375 thousandths.